of my existence. Something that I don't want to touch within a 10-foot pole. I feel like reopening wounds that were once healed. If there's one hell that's made for me, it would be this hellhole of a comic trilogy. And sure, I know there's been people on YouTube that cover these comics that came out years ago already, so why continue beating up that dead horse when I can just go focus on something else better, am I right? Ever stumbled across a tweet that kinda broke your brain? Because this tweet broke mine. And okay, maybe to give this person the benefit of the doubt, I don't think the tweet was made with malicious intentions, but having to see that tweet and being reminded of those comics despite not wanting to do anything with them, and the artist behind them whom I personally dislike, or to put it lightly, whom I have problems with. More on that later though. But anyway, having to be reminded of those comics and the artists behind them just gives me whiplash. It makes my stomach turn. So in today's video, and especially coming from the perspective of someone who's a diehard Zootopia fan, we're going to do a retrospective of the comics, the memes that came along with them, and the artist as a person, or the very least, the personality and behavior allegedly exhibited during the time of those comics being released. So, if I have to suffer, you're going to suffer with me too. Full disclosure, as much as I'm dreading in covering this, I do want to say that I don't think this video isn't going to be lighthearted and fun compared to my previous videos. I also want to add that rambling about a particular person on my channel isn't something that I want to do in the future, so that being said, please don't expect too much of that after this video. If anything, this video of me covering the comics and the artists behind them is just going to be a one and done deal. While I'll get into the artist as a person later throughout this video, it's something that I don't think has been covered a lot, at least on YouTube. I could be wrong though. And like I said, this video will be the only video where I cover not just the comics, but Borba as a person as well. And hey, maybe covering this will free me from the shackles of the hell that I try to avoid but can't. I don't think I have to make this kind of video, and I know for a fact that I'll regret making it in the future, but hey, somebody's going to take one for the team. With all of that being said, let's get started. Take a seat or even lay down on your bed as the video progresses, try to relax, and grab some Arby's and a drink. We're going to talk about the Zootopia abortion comic trilogy, or the Trilogy of Life, as it's called. Before we start covering the comics, we need to go over the two subjects that are important to the story, and those two subjects are none other than Zootopia and Borba himself. Released by Walt Disney Animation Studios on March 4, 2016, Zootopia was met with positive reviews, with critics praising the screenplay, animation, voice acting, and subject matter, breaking box office records, winning awards including Best Animated Feature at the 89th Academy Awards, expanding into a franchise along with a sequel to be released in 2025 next year, and as well having a dedicated fandom, especially when it comes to the furry side of things. The film takes place in the titular city where anthropomorphic animals coexist and tells the story of an unlikely partnership between rapid police officer Judy Hopps and Red Fox con artist Nick Wilde as they uncover a criminal conspiracy involving the disappearance of predators. Now, as I've brought up before in the beginning of the video and also in a previous video, I adore the heck out of this movie. I'm absolutely attached to the characters, story, and world building. While it was a movie that I was looking forward to seeing despite not having a lot of hype for it compared to the other animated movies that I wanted to see in 2016, I'm still surprised on how this movie managed to get rid of my depression as I was going through a rough time in my life prior to the film's release, become one of my magnum opuses throughout my internet life, and also become my inspiration and motivation to take digital art seriously. It's definitely one of my favorite animated Disney films to come out during the 2010s. So, if you're someone who has known me since my Zootopia days, first and foremost, you earn a veteran's discount. Secondly, how and why? And thirdly, know the the fuck you didn't. That being said, you're going to hear a lot of biases from me, though I will try my best to not shove it too much as the video progresses and we get into the serious and not so fun stuff. Now, what about Borba? Borba, whose full name is William Borba, is an artist from Brazil with a DeviantArt presence of 18.3k watchers and 3.1 million page views and has been on the website since 2002. Looking deep into his gallery with the art that he has done prior to making Zootopia art, his older art consisted of Amazon warriors, pirates, graphic novels, and anime, just to name a few. Where he first garnered momentum regarding Zootopia is a comic he made back in October 2016 called Night Howler Effect, which involves Nick pranking Judy as he uses Night Howler's essence, and in return, Judy pranks Nick in thinking that she's dead. I hope I did my best in summarizing that comic. And really quick, and also spoilers, if you haven't seen the movie and have no idea what the hell night howlers are, they're toxic flowers that turn predators feral, or savages as they're called. Anyway, going back to Borba, that comic was my introduction to him, and I'm pretty sure that comic also served as an introduction to the majority of the Zootopia fandom, so if anything, we were pretty much looking forward to what else he had in store for the fandom. He was releasing more Zootopia fan art and fan comics sometime between late 2016 and early 2017, which leads to March 17, 2017, where he released the first page of the first installment of the aforementioned comic trilogy that would eventually lead him, and I guess the entirety of the Zootopia fandom, to infamy. So, strap yourselves for a wild ride because this is going to be a lot. Before we start, I want you to follow a couple of important instructions for me. First and foremost, remember when I said that you're going to need to lie down on your bed as this video progresses? Yeah, because I think you might need it. If you need to pass out, feel welcome to do so. Don't try falling asleep though. Next up, take a few deep breaths. Breathe in, breathe out. And finally, if you feel like you need to pause the video a few times to the point that your well-being can't take enough of what we will be talking about in this video, you're more than welcome to do so. If you want to escape to your happy and comfy space for a bit, go on right ahead. Okay, I hope that helps, and please allow me to do my best in summarizing these comics to you, and while I can go over everything within the art is something that still shakens me to this very day. If anything, the comics are available for you to look up, so I apologize if I don't share every page in this video. With all of that being said, let's finally go over the comic. So, this comic is about Judy finding out she's pregnant with Nick's child, and Nick's overjoyed while Judy doesn't want to keep the baby. It eventually leads the two getting into a heated argument with Judy's concerns of how their baby would look like, the safety of an interspecies birth, and how it would affect her career. The two break up, and Nick walks out on Judy, and that's pretty much the comic. So, what are my thoughts on it? First off, I do think the art here is really good, and that also goes to his previous Zootopia art pieces and the later comics we will be covering. The way these pages are stylized came across to me as if I was reading manga. I guess this is due to the screen tone textures. Now, what about the story and how Nick and Judy were portrayed in the comic? So, I should go over my initial thoughts when it came to reading this comic for the first time. I'll be honest, I had no idea that this comic had something to do with abortion. And as I've acknowledged the film's themes regarding prejudice and discrimination, the comic's story had me go back and forth on what the hell was happening. At first, I pretty much took the story as a decent but different approach with how Nick and Judy's relationship was depicted. Speaking of Nick and Judy, again, at that time, I saw these two as if it seemed like Borba depicted them the way they were originally portrayed in the original film. But when I saw the page of Judy slapping Nick, you know, that slap, it did rub me the wrong way. I took their chemistry in the comic as it's a relationship that's having frictions, because perfect relationships can't just be all sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows. Sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows. Having arguments with your partner is one thing, and even if it's something you don't want to accept, it is a reality at the end of the day. Though, going over Nick and Judy's portrayal here, I just feel like both are at fault. Nick because he left Judy, and Judy because of her bitching and assaulting Nick. Now, from what I gathered from my research, Borba made this comic with the intent of showcasing a couple breaking up, and he chose an unplanned pregnancy as the rock upon which their relationship crashes. I don't think this comic was made with the intent of giving the middle finger to Wild Hop shippers. That's the ship name for Nick and Judy, by the way. In fact, I wouldn't think that's the case since he's done art of Nick and Judy together, and as much as I love them together, it wouldn't be my place to create schmoopy or lovey-dovey scenarios if I ever wanted to change their depictions in that comic. Like, I think you can keep the slow burn, but the dramaticness that was portrayed here feels on the nose. I truly believe Nick and Judy are really good friends, and I can see their chemistry going through both the good and the bad. And hey, here's to hoping if Zootopia 2 will deliver the sweetness, angst, and slow burn between the two. And like I brought up earlier, that slap just ain't it for me. Now we get onto my changed opinions after learning about the theme of abortion in that comic and the memes that came along with it. While there have been some people questioning if the comic has a pro-life stance and accusations are even made for doing so, Borba has denied that he is pro-life and the comic wasn't written to push a pro-life agenda either. And by the way, before I continue, regardless if you're pro-choice or pro-life or whatever political opinions you have, I'm making this video for the sake of going down memory lane, and an unfortunate one at that, with these comics and talking about Borba's alleged behavior and personality during the timeline of them being released. I'm not making this video for the sake of discussing whether abortion is right or wrong, and with that being said, if you have any feedback, please share feedback regarding these comics. I would not want to see a bloodbath happening in the comments section regarding political beliefs and opinions, so please, if you can be able to keep it that way, that would be great. Anyway, getting back into the topic at hand. When it came to the memes that came along with this comic, I do remember seeing a meme or two on Instagram back in late May / early June 2017, which was around the time the comic was completed, which involved the last page where Judy was on her knees and the door was left open, and I even remember going crazy over it. I thought it was funny at first, but having to look into what I discovered around that time and the memes that started surfacing later that year, it has this hit or miss value for me, and I will elaborate on that later. One thing that I didn't understand is why the memes were surfacing in December 2017 when the comic was completed in mid-2017. Even one of my friends, who's also a Zootopia fan, questioned this as well. Either way though, the internet was having one hell of a shit show and a field day with this. Now, when I say that the memes that occurred around that time have a hit or miss value to them, I will admit that there are some memes that did give me a good chuckle and some that I find distasteful to the point it would make my stomach turn. The memes regarding RVs and elf practice have given me a chuckle. Whenever I see that slap, I get absolute whiplash from it, and it makes my stomach turn. Heck, even one of the animators at Disney, Joaquin Baldwin, made a meme from that comic in regards to net neutrality in late 2017. I guess there's a chance that abortion would be acknowledged in Zootopia too. Okay, but on a more serious note though, I don't think I could see Disney doing that, nor do I have any high hope that's going to happen in the sequel anyway. But if it does happen, I'm definitely going to be hit with whiplash, drop my jaw, leave the movie theater, and yeet myself to the sun. Okay, I'm probably not gonna leave the movie theater, but throwing myself into the sun on the other hand, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to put that in my bucket list. As much as I'm exaggerating, I'm sure you get what I mean anyway. The movie isn't even out and I'm already getting livid about something that hasn't even happened yet. I need to stop doing that. I need to learn to exercise on trying not to get mad over things that haven't happened yet. But you best believe, Disney, if you do something like that, I would absolutely be losing my shit. Now, when it comes to the mix of memes and serious nature of abortion, and maybe I'm reaching all of this, and regardless of my opinions on abortion, I feel like where I draw the line is poking fun or making a mockery out of abortion. Again, saying all of this feels like a stretch, but I don't know, I just can't see abortion as a laughing matter for me personally. And one more thing before I get into the conclusion of this segment is that there was this one time I met up with one of my cousins and he asked me about the comic, and I was like, dude, don't bring up that comic ever again. I did tell him that I liked the art style of the comic, and we went on to another conversation. By the end of the video, I will get into the topic of the comics being the first thing that people would think of when it comes to Zootopia and its fandom, but I'm just going to say right now that these comics aren't a good representation of the Zootopia fandom. Again, I'll get more into that later. Even if that was the only time of being asked in real life about those comics, so far, who knows, maybe after this video, I'm still going to get a question about it. I don't think my cousin did it with malicious intention, and he has acknowledged my love for the movie months before even asking me about I Will Survive. So what are my final thoughts? Well, when it comes to fan content that explores dark, serious, and complex ideas that's outside of its original source material, I just feel like I Will Survive, or at least its writing, had a poor execution. I think it's one thing to have characters go over something serious like abortion, but the overdramaticness and even the bizarre facial expressions drawn within the comic has made me taken aback. And I've said this before and I will say it again, Nick and Judy were both at fault and were just so damn unlikable here. I will be charitable for when I say that even if the writing was executed poorly, that shouldn't be held over Borba's head, and I believe he has room for improvement. The story was a bit competent enough, but there still needed to be some substance. And for me to be appalled on the subject matter, I didn't let my curiosity die and longed for a follow-up that could at least redeem the faults and problems that the first comic had. And oh boy, do I have some things to say about the sequel. Let's talk about Born to Be Alive. The sequel to I Will Survive, this comic takes place a year later after the events of the first comic. Even though they haven't spoken to each other for a year, Nick shows up at Judy's apartment in the middle of the night, demanding to talk to her. She lets him in, and after some small talk, Judy reveals she terminated her pregnancy. Nick begs to be taken back, but it's revealed that Judy has moved on and is in a relationship with a vixen named Shay. Nick and Judy argue, and Shay is injured in the scuffle. Judy throws Nick out of the apartment, demanding he stay out of her life forever, and Judy and Shay then fall into a comforting embrace.
What the hell is that?
Listen, I may have longed for a sequel, but the execution just ain't it. Now, to be brief with my overall thoughts on this comic, as Nick and Judy weren't likable in the first comic, I was hoping that maybe either one of them, or maybe even both, to at least redeem with one another, or at the very least, talk it out like civil and reasonable adults. But, unsurprisingly, they're still in the wrong and they managed to get worse. I will admit that I wasn't expecting Judy to be with a vixen either, and honestly, that ending felt abrupt as hell. While I'm not going to repeat too much on how good the art is within these comics, I will say that the fact that Borba referenced Arby's and elf practice in this one definitely gave me a good laugh. And on another note, no extreme and bizarre expressions here compared to the first comic, so good riddance, I guess. Regardless of how I found the story in this comic to be shit and have to live up the aftermath of it, I was starting to grow some concerns regarding Borba around the time this comic was completed, to where these comics would eventually give him a bad reputation. When it comes to his work overall, both the good and bad can be acknowledged. I had faith that the third comic would be redeemable of the first two comics, but I still wasn't going to hold my breath on it. Really quick, before I cover Never Say Goodbye, Borba has done a comic called The Longest Night, which was released back in 2020, and it takes place between I Will Survive and Born to Be Alive. I won't be covering The Longest Night for the sake of time, so I will be linking a video done by a YouTuber who goes by the name of Shade Nocturne, in which in his video about Never Say Goodbye, he covers The Longest Night first. In fact, he's even covered the first two comics, and I think his videos on this comic trilogy are pretty good, so go check out his videos if you wish. Anyway, on to the comic. Nick, who's now a scoutmaster, is accompanying a group of children on a field trip when Judy, who's now been elected mayor of Zootopia, passes through the area being surrounded by security and drawing a lot of attention. Despite their harsh breakup and one failed attempt at reconciling from Nick, the two are now on good terms again and talk about how their lives have changed since the last they've seen each other. As mentioned before, Nick is now a scoutmaster while Judy is trying to pass more pro-mammal equality legislation despite threats from radical political groups, and both of them have gone married and are raising their children. Nick now has a son named Nicholas Wilde Jr., while Judy and Shay have adopted a zebra boy named Rafiki and a red panda girl named Mulan. I really don't know what I should say about this, honestly. Nick also apologizes to Shay for having hurt her in their previous confrontation, and she forgives him for his behavior. In the end, Judy and Nick have to head their separate ways again, but not before hugging each other and calling each other friend. And we get an extra epilogue where Judy gets assassinated a la JFK style, and whoop-de-doo, she's actually alive and the blood was actually cherry jam. We then catch a glimpse of an elephant and bear arguing who shot Judy and eventually get arrested while they continue arguing. Now, before I go over my thoughts, I will admit that I didn't keep up with this comic a lot compared to the former two comics. Around the time that Borba was working on this comic, I was taking a break from the Zootopia fandom as I went on to do other things. Though having to see a few pages, I felt some rage and shock about to build up, but also this was where I started to distance from Borba due to the behavior he was allegedly putting out when it comes to how he would treat those critiquing him. Again, allegedly. I'll get more into that in the next segment. Okay, so what do I have to say about this comic? Well, did I get what I want regarding Nick and Judy making amends at least? I guess so, and even if they don't end up being together anymore at that point, I think that's fine by me. No altercations between them, no altercation between Nick and Shay, no BS. But alas, I shall go over a few things that threw me off guard and even poke fun at things that seem trivial. First off, if I had the chance to rip that toupee off of Judy's head, I would. Don't even get me started on the radicalists and extremists. It's one thing to acknowledge the film's themes of prejudice and fear, but going on to add Nazis to this comic is so on the nose. It even feels like night and day comparing this comic to I Will Survive. Oh look, we even get to see some Disney characters in Zootopia, such as Timon, Pumbaa, Brer Fox, and Brer Rabbit in a BLM shirt. Wait, what? Once again, this is so on the nose! And then we have Judy getting JFK'd, and while I can be relieved and probably laugh it off that she was covered in cherry jam and didn't actually die, it's something that I feel taken aback with. And I don't know about you, but the way she died kind of reminded me of the Night Howler's Essence comic where she pranked Nick into thinking that she actually died when she didn't. And also the ending scene in the movie where Bellwether shot Nick with the Night Howler and made him all savage, when in actuality the Night Howler was a blueberry and he and Judy were acting. But then again, Borba, what kind of mental gymnastics did you go through to make something like that? Overall though, as this comic is what it is, and I can say the same thing for this entire comic trilogy, no matter how much of a lifesaver the art is, I don't think its narrative and the way it dipped in quality is forgivable. Disappointed and shocked for the most part, but I don't think I'm surprised either. And yeah, that sums up my overall thoughts on this overall comic trilogy. I don't think I have anything else to add in this segment, so I'll leave it at that for today. Now, I could have just talked about the comic trilogy and ended this video now and finally go on with my day. But if there's something that hasn't been touched upon aside from the comics, at least on YouTube, it would be none other than Borba's personality, or at the very least, the behavior he allegedly displayed during the timeline of those comics being released. Granted, as the behavior and personality that he allegedly exhibited happened years ago at this point, it's something that I still can't wrap my head around, to where I decided to distance away from him. There could be a chance that he's improved as a person, and even then, I still get a bad taste in my mouth regarding him sometimes. And whenever I bring up that I want nothing to do with those comics, it mostly stems on my distaste with Borba and the way he allegedly treated his critics and his ego getting to him. Now, to throw in another disclaimer really quick, as much as I dislike Borba, nor do I condone the behavior he allegedly displayed, I don't think it's something that should be held over his head. Though for me to bring this up and make a segment dedicated to all of this, and again, even if all of this happened years ago, I think it can be a learning experience that we can benefit by. How to and how not to react to your critics. How to and how not to treat other people. And what you should and shouldn't do. Just be a better person and do better than be a shitty one. As I brought up minutes ago at the end of my Born to Be Alive segment, I was starting to grow concerned regarding Borba around 2019 to the point I feel like making these kinds of comics were going to lead him a bad reputation, and despite the BS that he was receiving around that time, I genuinely hoped that he can do better and learn from all of this, and I wish no ill will against him. However, around this time, or at the very least when he completed the second comic, I've heard through the grapevine that he was allegedly being an asshole to those who are giving criticism, whether it's constructive or destructive, to him, and that he's feeding off the hate and anger that people are throwing at him. It's one thing to get mean, hateful, and nasty comments, and I definitely don't condone that, and I also want to say, don't send any hate or harassment towards Borba or anyone else mentioned in this video, and regardless of my opinions and criticism towards Borba and throwing in a few jabs here and there, I still don't think he deserves further retaliation towards him, especially for something that he has allegedly done years ago at this point. Though when it comes to giving constructive criticism and then you see it as hate and act like it's not worth your time to where your ego gets to you, that's where I would have a problem. How I discovered the word of Borba's alleged behavior was through comments under posts of his comic pages from a certain adult furry website that I don't even think I can name drop on YouTube, but if you know, you know. In fact, don't think about questioning me about it. I like living on the edge sometimes. And don't even get me started on the amount of downvotes that most of the comic pages for Born to Be Alive and Never Say Goodbye have received. Anyway, as I was concerned about Borba during that period, I did have to take these comments with a grain of salt, but at the same time, I can understand why people would think about him like that, given that it wasn't a good look for him around that period. In fact, he actually wrote this journal entry sometime around December 2018 while still working on Born to Be Alive, and allow me to give you, my dear viewers, a dramatic reading of it. How to lure starving fishes. I knew that some starving fishes would be seduced by the tasty bait I prepared as my previous entry of this journal, making them easy prey of my hook. These smelly fishes hallucinate about having the power and authority to tell us, humble mortals, what we can and cannot do when it comes to fanworks, but I want to congratulate them for being such perfect examples of the kind of zealotry that is poisoning Zootopia's fandom. They love to accuse me of causing disruption to this fandom, but it was already going through serious problems months before I started producing I Will Survive. To pause here really quick, I will give him that. The Zootopia fandom has its fair share of good and bad apples even before Borba worked on the comic trilogy, though I would probably argue that I Will Survive was, and still is unfortunately, where the fandom was at its infamy. In fact, I'd even argue that the furry and After Dark sides of the fandom feels trivial compared to I Will Survive, and the latter still feels like hell to me. And hey, even before seeing Zootopia, I figured that the fandom will have its fair share of bad, toxic moments, but I didn't want to dwell too much on it. But alas, for 15-year-old me having Zootopia as her comfort film while still coping with depression during that time, ignorance is bliss, and I eventually came to a breaking point with the fandom due to burnout and toxicity. Anyway, going back to the journal, actually, it's the persecution caused by these zealots against everything they consider non-canonical or not according to their taste that is ruining this fandom and causing several artists to leave it for good. But I need to say that this tactic doesn't work with me because I feed on their hatred, jealousy, and envy. The more they insist on teaching me lessons about how to create a good fanfic with canonical characters, the more I laugh at them and amuse myself with their idiocy display. Yes, yes, keep coming. Yum. I feel your anger. Delicious. Oh my god. I have no words, honestly. Okay, to go back on what I just said regarding giving him criticism, whether it's constructive or destructive, especially with giving him constructive criticism, he's not going to accept it and even go out of his way to call anyone criticizing him haters, or at least that's what I've heard, and exhibit such egotistical behavior. Either way, I do have to agree that this kind of behavior is unhinged, which leads to Borba allegedly getting 2 users banned and silenced just because they disagreed agreed with them. Again, take these claims and screenshots shown here with a grain of salt, but I will admit that I grew a bit of fear at one point on getting banned by Borba because of the alleged antics that I don't agree with and my 2 cents on the first 2 comics. Even having to make this video, let alone in 2024, years after the comic trilogy was finished, I still feel a bit terrified of further retaliation from him. Flash forward to Never Say Goodbye, and like I mentioned minutes ago, I didn't keep up with this comic too much compared to the previous 2 comics, and I was also taking a break from the Zootopia fandom around that time, but that still didn't take away the shock and horror that I would feel. You know how there are radical political groups that don't agree with Judy? Well, apparently, Borba stated that the groups that don't agree with Judy represent those who disagree with or have criticized him. And in Borba's view, he compared his critics to Nazis. So, hey, Borba, if me sharing my 2 cents on everything I covered in this video is going to make me a Nazi as well, then so be it. But, as always, I wanted to take this with a grain of salt, and I still believe that everything going on around that time still wasn't a good look on him regardless. Which leads 2 months later, around November 2021, after he finished Never Say Goodbye, I will stumble upon this Reddit post on r/Zootopia where it has an analysis of Borba and the comic trilogy and interesting information that's been documented that would be otherwise lost at time. I do want to warn you though, for when I say that there's a lot in this post to look into, and I won't be covering everything in that post for the sake of time, so I will be leaving a link to the Reddit post in the description if you do want to check it out, and please form your own opinion and conclusion regarding all of the information provided on the post. There's a section in the post that covers Borba's alleged remarks towards the Zootopia fandom, use of shock value, and narcissism. Again, I won't go over everything in that section, so take it for what you will. And having to go over a few things brought up in that post could eventually validate the criticisms regarding Borba, or at least the ones that I'm personally familiar with, and also my own personal criticisms regarding him during the timeline of the comic trilogy being released. And I think it's important that I have to put emphasis on the timeline of Borba releasing the 3 comics because I want that to be the main focus when it comes to discussing him in this video. I also want to add that even if the Reddit post was made a few years ago at this point, and like I said before, I do think some of the things provided in it can at least verify the criticisms regarding Borba, and I will say again that the alleged behavior he displayed during that period shouldn't be something that needs to be held over his head, and it could be possible that he's grown and changed in recent years, though regardless of the opinions and criticisms, I still don't think it's appropriate to send him or anyone else for that matter further retaliation, hate, death threats, or anything harmful. That being said, let's finally take a look at some of the key points in that section of the post. First off, the narcissistic side of Borba. While we have covered that kind of behavior he allegedly exhibited from the journal entry that was brought up earlier, the Reddit post did bring up how there have been a few times in some of the DeviantArt comments where he would allegedly display it. Now here's the thing, there's a comment made on that adult furry website that claims that Borba has a personality disorder, and for me personally, I'm not gonna go out of my way to diagnose him on whether or not he has a personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder especially. He may have shown his alleged narcissism, but I won't go too far to say that he's diagnosed with NPD either. Anyway, I don't think I have too much to say regarding all of this, and even if I have brought up how this kind of behavior feels unhinged before, I will say it again, it does feel scummy to say the least. Secondly, Borba's use of shock value. I mean, let's be honest, at least when it comes to this comic trilogy, it feels like the embodiment of shock value in a way. Though I would argue that Never Say Goodbye had the most shock value when it comes to some of their pages. When it comes to the development and production of Never Say Goodbye, Borba had plans to release the first page sometime around July or August of 2020, but he delayed it for 2021 due to the nature of the comic and how awful 2020 was, especially regarding politics around that time, for the sake of not getting any backlash. Though the Reddit post went on to say that Borba eventually got away with it in 2021 after the heat died down regarding politics by giving Judy that Trump toupee, getting Judy JFK'd, putting Brer Rabbit in a BLM shirt, and adding radical political groups that don't agree with Judy. That eventually hints at the groups disagreeing with her is the critics disagreeing with him. Don't get me started on the shock I felt regarding Brer Rabbit, because I still feel like it's on the nose to put him in a BLM shirt despite knowing the fact that he and Brer Fox are are characters that come from a really racist Disney movie that was released many years ago, but I digress. Oh, and Judy getting JFK'd? Again, I want to know what kind of mental gymnastics was Borba going through when making that bit, because I would feel my stomach turn whenever I see that page. And finally, Borba's remarks towards the Zootopia fandom. Okay, maybe this can add up to what I brought up regarding Borba's alleged narcissism, but the screenshot of this comment here, which I found from one of the links provided from the Reddit post, this is one remark from him that I've at least stumbled upon in regards to the Zootopia fandom. From the journal entry where he called those giving him constructive criticism haters, to this comment, to symbolizing the radical political groups as his critics, I just feel like he's an absolute mess and headache within the fandom around that time, and there have even been some fans who turned their backs away from him, myself included. Again, the whole Reddit post is in the description if you do want to check it out. You're more than welcome to form your own opinions and conclusions regarding all of this, and it's up to you on what you want to believe. I just feel like for me to bring up this Reddit post, and like I've said before, it could at least validate the criticisms, my personal criticisms especially regarding Borba. For example, his alleged narcissism. I suppose the closer for this segment would be this. Even when all of this happened many years ago and Borba hasn't caused some kind of ruckus as of right now, and as I am aware, I feel that Borba lived through a wild life when it comes to that period of infamy regarding those comics. From the spectacular talent that he has in his Zootopia art to eventually becoming a scumbag and troll that some people claimed, who wasted his artistic talent after treating others poorly. Again, there's an amount of people who talked about these comics, especially I Will Survive on YouTube, but the discussion regarding Borba as a person is something that feels overlooked in my opinion. Sure, there was the Reddit post and screenshots of the comments that I shared earlier, but in terms of discussing this on YouTube, it's something that I don't see a lot, as far as I'm aware. I do want to make it clear that I'm not advocating for Borba to be banned, deplatformed, cancelled, or anything like that, by the way, and I'm also not here to tell you that you should unfollow him due to his alleged actions. Whether or not that you still want to follow him, that's up for you to decide, and I'm not going to stop anyone for that. And once again, despite my criticism towards him and how much I dislike him, I still don't think he deserves any form of retaliation. I do hope after everything that has happened that he could probably take the time to step back, reflect, grow, and learn from all of this. My wish is that he should be a better person and not treat others like shit. And if he does continue his bad behavior, then so be it. And Borba, if you do watch this video and you want to get in contact with me and settle this out as two reasonable and civil adults, my notes on DeviantArt are open. I don't hate you, but I hope you can do better. I gotta be honest, I never thought I'd talk about this in 2024, but here we are now, I guess. So just to reflect on what I had to go through in making this video, when it comes to looking into this comic trilogy, especially from the perspective of a Zootopia fan, it's something that I still have mixed feelings with to this day. And depending on how you see them, this comic trilogy is both a blessing and curse for the fandom. But for me personally, it feels like a curse. And not to be that person, and apologies for the shift in direction and something that I brought up a while ago in this video, but speaking on personal experiences regarding being asked about those comics due to my love for Zootopia, I'm still dreading on being questioned about them and taken aback to this day. So hey, to anyone I know who might stumble upon this video and ask me about those comics, you got your answer. I don't want to touch them with a 10-foot pole. And yes, even if my cousin asking me about it at one point was the one time that has happened to me, you're probably not going to escape something like that. It's either, oh, you love Zootopia, have you seen those comics? Or, oh, you love Zootopia, are you a furry then? It's never being acknowledged for the sake of having another niche and interest for a Disney movie. I can guarantee you that I would be absolutely annoyed if someone were to ask me those kinds of questions. They're not offensive, they're not the worst, just straight up annoying. Now, to be totally charitable and generous here, the furry thing is at least less harmful compared to the comics, and there shouldn't be any shame in being a furry, by the way. I've said this in a previous video, and I will say it again, I'm not a furry, and I don't think I want to put that label upon me, and that's totally okay. It's just that the furry thing wasn't in the cards for me before and after seeing Zootopia, and what the film did for me really was rescue my vulnerably and emotionally damaged ass and develop a niche and interest for another Disney movie, like I said before, since making fan art and fan content for other Disney movies were my forte back then. Anyway, getting back into topic, which leads me to my next point. In terms of seeing them as infamous internet phenomena, when it comes to people thinking about the comics and memes as the first thing when thinking about Zootopia and its fandom, and something that I brought up many minutes ago, it's not a representation to be proud of, nor is it the best feeling. Again, every fandom of a piece of media is going to have its bad apples and a slice of infamy on the side, but the comic trilogy might have to be one of the most blatant examples for the Zootopia fandom. While I'm all for creating fan content that explores dark, serious, and complex ideas that's outside of its original source material, I still think the overall execution of these comics are poor, yet on the nose. Now here's the thing, I don't think bringing up a sensitive subject like abortion in a fan creation for Zootopia, or anything else for that matter really, is a bad idea, and if it can at least be executed properly, then that would be great. It's the overdramaticness and bizarre expressions in I Will Survive that I still can't shake away from and still dread to this very day. And by all means, as much as I've expressed my distaste with the comics, and no matter how much I want to avoid them like the plague, I do feel like people are still going to talk about them, but it's whatever at this point. If you want something better than the comic trilogy, I recommend watching Zootopia, or even checking out some of the other fan content made for the film, and even Borba's other works. Or really, just go outside and touch grass. Do anything else but waste your sanity on those comics. And I will say one last time, please do not send any hate or harassment towards Borba or anyone else mentioned in this video. I do want to end this video on a lighter note though. While it has nothing to do with what we discussed in this entire video, I do want to share a drawing that I've done of Nick and Judy cuddling in a screen tone art style as a palette cleanser, if you will. I actually had this kind of drawing in mind for years now and put it in the back burner for a while, and I thought, why not get it out now and also provide the art process as B-roll footage? I would consider this drawing to be a follow-up to two standalone screen tone drawings that I've done of the two back in 2016. Regardless, I definitely improved a lot in my art. Doing screen tone is rare, but I still like to do some more of it in the future, so if you want to see more of that, let me know. With that being said, I want to thank you all so much for watching and making it all the way to the end of this video. I know that this video wasn't an easy video to make, but whatever happens to this video happens. This video is what it is. If you like this video, feel welcome to give it a thumbs up. If you aren't subscribed to the channel, feel welcome to subscribe if you want to. Don't forget to check out my social media platforms down in the description below, and feel welcome to share this video if you want. That's the end of the video. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where I do part 1 of my Shrek franchise deep dive. I'm absolutely looking forward to making this upcoming deep dive mini-series, so I do hope you stay tuned for that. I need to get some water before I start losing my voice. I am this close to losing it at this point, but anyway, I'll see you soon.